Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are exploring one of the most powerful and transformative chapters in modern history, the American Civil Rights Movement. This was a struggle that reshaped a nation, challenged injustice, and inspired movements for equality around the world. In this video, we are uncovering 50 extraordinary facts about this movement, from landmark court cases and courageous activists to historic protests that changed the course of history. Some of these stories are widely known, while others reveal the incredible bravery of people whose contributions are often overlooked. Let's begin our journey in the early years of the movement. To understand the civil rights movement, we must first look at the legal and social battles that ignited it. In 1954, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a groundbreaking decision in the case of Brown v. Board of Education. This ruling declared that racial segregation in public schools was unconstitutional, overturning the long-standing separate but equal doctrine that had justified segregation for decades. The legal team behind this historic victory was led by Thurgood Marshall, a brilliant lawyer who later became the first black justice on the U.S. Supreme Court. His strategy involved presenting evidence that segregation caused deep psychological harm to African American children. This case didn't just change school policies, it sparked a nationwide push for racial equality and gave hope to millions who had endured generations of discrimination. But legal victories alone weren't enough. Real change required courage in everyday life. One of the most famous acts of defiance occurred in 1955, when Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a segregated bus in Montgomery, Alabama. Her arrest sparked the historic Montgomery bus boycott, a protest where African Americans refused to ride city buses for over a year. The boycott crippled the bus system economically and demonstrated the power of organized, nonviolent resistance. Leading the protest was a young minister named Martin Luther King Jr. His leadership during the boycott helped introduce him as one of the most influential voices of the movement. Years later, during the massive March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom in 1963, King delivered his legendary "I Have a Dream" speech from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. More than 250,000 people gathered that day, making it one of the largest demonstrations for civil rights in American history. Throughout the 1960s, peaceful protests became one of the movement's most powerful tools. Students organized sit-ins at segregated lunch counters across the American South. Freedom riders challenged segregation on interstate buses, risking violence and arrest to expose injustice. Another defining moment came during the Selma to Montgomery marches in 1965. Protesters marched to demand fair voting rights, but they were met with brutal violence from law enforcement. Images of the attacks, especially on a day later known as Bloody Sunday, shocked the nation and drew international attention to the struggle for equality. The courage of these protesters forced political leaders to confront the reality of systemic discrimination. The pressure created by protests and activism eventually led to major legislative victories. In 1964, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the historic Civil Rights Act of 1964 into law. This legislation outlawed segregation in public spaces and banned discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. Just 1 year later, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was passed. This law removed barriers such as literacy tests and discriminatory practices that had prevented African Americans from voting. These laws represented some of the most significant civil rights protections in American history, but they would not have been possible without the efforts of thousands of activists working behind the scenes. While famous leaders often received the most attention, the civil rights movement was built by ordinary people with extraordinary courage. One of these figures was Fannie Lou Hamer, a voting rights activist who endured violence and intimidation while fighting for political representation for Black Americans. Organizations such as the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, often called SNCC, mobilized young activists across the country. These students organized voter registration drives, protests, and community education programs. Their grassroots work ensured that the movement reached small towns and rural communities, not just major cities. The civil rights movement did not only influence the United States. Its message of justice and equality inspired activists across the globe. Leaders fighting oppression in other countries looked to the strategies of nonviolent protest and civil disobedience used by American civil rights leaders. Movements opposing racial injustice, colonial rule, and apartheid adopted similar tactics, proving that the fight for equality was truly universal. Today, the legacy of the civil rights movement continues to shape conversations about justice, equality, and human rights. The bravery of those who marched, protested, and spoke out reminds us that progress is often achieved through persistence, courage, and collective action. Understanding this history helps us better understand the challenges society still faces today. Those were 50 extraordinary facts and moments from the American civil rights movement. A story of determination, sacrifice, and hope that transformed a nation. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with others who love history. And remember, learning from the past helps us build a better future.